Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Assassin. This is the Nightblade stamina build for Dragon Bones, and remember, these builds are made to help you get to end game. Okay? All the builds I'm releasing are to help you get to end game. So this build is my DPS builds are built to be self-reliant in a lot of ways, but also to be very self-efficient. So they can work as stamina DPS and as a little bit of like they're just self-sufficient at their own resources. They're self-sufficient when it comes to survivability and everything else. So these are not meta builds, by the way, also. So don't try to expect them to be. You can adjust them to be meta style if you want. So let's get right into it, taking a look right now at the class, or the thing, the character sheet. We are a Nightblade Stamina DPS, as it says. We are an Argonian, and the reason I chose Argonian over all the other races is mainly because of how the race works with this class. It doesn't get a super high stamina. Now, Khajiit is better. I'm not going to lie, Khajiit is better, but I play personally an Argonian on live, and I like it. It's like my favorite, one of my favorite characters. But you can be a Khajiit, which would be better in the long run. As you can see, we have 61 into stamina, 3 into health. If you're playing an Argonian, make sure you put 4 into health, 60 into stamina. That's going to give you the best results. With being a Khajiit, you also have like almost a 12k magicka, 17k health, and like a 31k stamina with the build. What this build is, you can see it's a little different. We do have a stamina recovery of 1492 with a weapon damage of 3351 and 47% weapon critical. We do have a 12k spell resistance with a 12k physical resistance. And then moving down here, we are running the Warrior Mundus Stone with Dubious Cameron Throne as our food. Now, if you are going to play this at end game, like Vet Trials, you're going to want to change to dual stat food and drop the Dubious Cameron Throne. Alright, so moving on to the gear sets here, we are running a two-piece Veladrith, and it is, Divines, Divines with a tri-stat in the helm and a medium stamina thing here. And then, like I said, if you're playing an Argonian or a Khajiit, you're going to want to put tri-stats in the middle here and here. So this one runs Divines, or Stamina glyphs here, and then all of its Stamina except for the Monster set, which is Tri-Stat, because Argonians already get 9% max health. The reason Veladrith, it just does really good damage, and it'll also proc your other set. So we are running a heavy chest with a light belt, and this is a Night Mother's setup, so we are running Night Mother's Gaze. And Night Mothers is a great set for a Nightblade because, one, they already get a high crit value. For having assassination ability slotted, they get extra crit. If you're playing an Argonian, you get extra crit. You can have almost a 60% crit value. So it's good to use Night Mother's Gaze on them for that extra critical damage. You reduce the enemy's physical pin by 2,580 for 6 seconds. So try to keep that up, applied as much as possible, and it will pretty much be up all the time. The other set we're running is Swamp Raiders. Now, a lot of people are really kind of going, huh? Now, Swamp Raiders works on both DK and Nightblades. The reason why I say that is because DKs have a lot of poison damage abilities. So look at what this set does. Okay, compared to Night Mothers, which gives you 2 things of crit, weapon damage, and then the 5-piece bonus, this gives you 1 crit, 1 weapon damage, max stamina, and then the 5-piece. When you deal damage with a magic ability, your poison and disease damage abilities gain an additional 440 weapon damage for 10 seconds. DKs do poison damage with a lot of their abilities, and so they gain a really good benefit from this set. Our Nightblades do a lot of disease damage, so they gain a lot of benefit from this set, along with the poison damage, because they do use poison damage abilities along with that. So they get a really good bonus out of this. So you can use this at normal levels or in-game. This drops in Shadowfen Swamp. Alright, moving on to the weapons. This is where things are going to get a little different from what a lot of people suggest. And that's because we are running the Swamp Raider's sword and dagger. The sword is infused with a Crusher enchant. The dagger is Nirnhoned with an Absorb Magicka enchant. Now, the reason we have an Absorb Magicka enchant in here is because it will proc the benefit of Swamp Raider. So it can proc Swamp Raider, but so can Veladriths. So Veladriths will proc the Swamp Raider along with that magic enchant, and it keeps it consistently applied. It should never be off of you with this setup. So the reason we're running the Crusher enchant is because DPS gain the greater benefit from running it. I know a lot of people will argue that point, but it's true. They gain a greater benefit from running the Crusher enchant because they can keep a consistency of it applied 100% versus a tank. And I did test this in the newest dungeons. I can keep up Crusher with my tank at a 70 to 80% rate, and that's running 2 Crushers. 70 to 80% rate. With a DPS, I have 100% uptime. 100. That's why I chose to put this on there. And so I tested this, and I wanted to make sure that I did before I even released it. So stamina DPS work best with Crusher enchants, especially if they're running dual wield. If you are running a two-handed sword, do not run a Crusher enchant. Run a Nirnhoned two-handed weapon with whatever glyph you want on it. Preferably, I would suggest, if you're going to do that, run something related to your class. So if it's like, if you're playing a Nightblade and you're running a two-handed, run Disease. If you're running a DK, run a Poison. If you're running a Sork, run a Shock enchant, or one that does some kind of physical damage. Well, you can't run Disease or Poison. Well, you could run Disease or Poison or Shock with it. If you're running a Warden with a two-handed, run a Frost enchant or a Magic enchant. And if you're running a Templar, definitely run a Magic enchant with Stam Recovery. So that's what my suggestion is. Now, if you're running this setup, you run it this way because it's going to give you the greater benefit. Now, on the back bar, we are running a Swamp Raider bow, and watch what happens when I swap to my back bar. I only lose the 5-piece bonus. Now, because this has an uptime of 10% or 10 seconds, I'm not on my back bar for more than 4 or 5 seconds. So I can keep it up, the buff from this, even on the back bar. So now I will tell you this: if you're gonna play this at end game, swap this out to a Maelstrom bow, and the only thing you're gonna lose is that four-piece part, which is the max stamina. So you are gonna lose a little bit of stamina, which is gonna suck for this setup. The other setup that you can go with, and I know a lot of people will say no, go agility here and go Maelstrom or Master weapons, Master Sword and Dagger with a or an axe and dagger, either one, and go with the Maelstrom bow. And go with agility here. You will actually see a massive increase in your character's DPS from that. But I like this setup personally. I think it works out a little bit better. So, and that's it for the gear. So moving on to the skills. Make sure you unlock all your class abilities, passives, or class passives, because you will utilize them. And if you're playing in a dungeon, just to let you know, or you're playing solo, you can swap out Shrouded Daggers for surprise attacks so you can get that major fracture when you're solo playing. So, because when you're playing in the open world, mobs in the open world have a 9,100 resistance level, so you'll basically remove it all with having the Crusher, the Night Mother's Gaze, and having this, and they won't have any penetration or any resistances. It's gone. You'll nuke them. Otherwise, you don't really need it. So, but make sure you get all your class passives. Moving on through the weapons, dual wield passives, bow passives, armor. You are running a 5-1-1 setup. You are running 5 medium, 1 heavy, 1 light. So make sure you get the passives from these. This one is what you need from here, the spell warding. Medium armor, you need all the passives, and in heavy, you need all the top 3 passives. Moving on to the world skills, you can be a vampire or werewolf with this build. It's up to you. I choose not to because I just like the benefits that I get elsewhere, or otherwise. Soul Summons and Soul Lock, really good to have from World Skills. Fighters Guild, make sure you have all the Fighters Guild passives unlocked. Mages Guild, you only need Persuasive Will. Undaunted, make sure you get all both the Undaunted passives. And then Alliance Warrior, you want to make sure you have Caltrops and Resolving Vigor, because your DPS is going to be pretty good with this. But Caltrops basically, because if you want to swap out on the back bar, you can swap Caltrops for Rearming Trap. You will lose that 10% critical damage, but you do gain another dot over time. So you do have that option if you want to do it. Both of them are dots, but it's really up to you if you want to swap Caltrops out. But you definitely want Resolving Vigor. Moving on to racials, make sure you get all the racial passives. And then in crafting, I always make sure I get the alchemy, medicinal use. This way I get the longer lasting potions for in trials, because potions last, just so you guys can see this, potions last for 41.3 seconds. But because of the cooldown, it's 45. Otherwise, it's like almost a minute if you don't have that 20%. So, yeah, it helps out a lot if you don't have the alchemy use. So you can keep potions up more often. And then food, definitely for DPS, make sure you get this, because you are going to be using a dual stat 1 hour food, and you won't be running that dubious Cameron Throne like I am right now. I run this mainly for dungeons because I can self-sustain. Like in a dungeon, no problem. And in normal trials, I have self-sustain. I don't have to rely on synergies and a bunch of other things. It makes the run a lot smoother. And in trials, like normal trials, you can run this setup. You don't have to change anything. When you go to vet trials or hard mode trials, that's when you want to change like the stuff around. You want that extra weapon damage here. You want to do, you still can run dubious Cameron Throne if you want, or you can switch to the dual stat food. And you want that Maelstrom bow. This build also can almost solo the Maelstrom Arena. Almost. I'm not that skilled, so I say almost. Somebody else could probably do it. So yeah, back to the skills now. On the main bar, we are running Rending Slashes. We are not running Blood Craze because we are running Resolving Vigor. So we are not running Blood Craze. And the reason, also, other reason why we're not running Blood Craze is this actually does more damage than Blood Craze. Rending Slashes does. So that's why I run it. The next ability we have is Shrouded Daggers. Like I said, you can run the surprise tech, but you're going to have a tank applying Major Fracture, so no reason to have it. This is going to work out for you in the long run better, and it does more damage anyways. Next up, we have Deadly Cloak. This does really good damage over time, but it also gives you a reduced damage from area of effect attacks, so by 25%. Next up, we have Killer's Blade. This is your execute, but do not just treat it like an execute. Actually utilize it in your rotation, because it just gives you that much more damage. Now, if you happen to kill an enemy, or an enemy dies within 2 seconds of you using this, that will also give you 20% of your max health back. So, but it's a really great ability. Next up, Resolving Vigor. This is a great heal, especially when you're completely buffed out with all your potions and food and all that kind of stuff. If you look, really powerful heal for you and your allies. That's another reason why I choose Argonian. After that, we have Flawless Dawnbreaker. We have this here for the weapon damage, not for the activation of the ability, unless I'm doing dungeons and I'm fighting trash and I want to clear trash really quick. Flawless Dawnbreaker comes into play, but if I'm fighting a boss, I don't use this. I just use it for the weapon damage. Onto the back bar, we have Rearming Trap. This is a great ability because it also gives you minor force for 6 seconds. So while you're on the back bar, this will be up for most of it. When you're on the front bar, it won't be up at all, hardly at all. But it still does help to have it up as much as you can. Next, we have Poison Injection. This does a lot of damage on the initial hit and damage over time, but it's also considered a minor execute because it doesn't get increased damage to enemies below 50% health. The damage over time deals up to 260% more damage to enemies below 50% health. So, so as it's taking damage away, it'll grow, and it grows in strength the lower their health gets. Next up, we have Endless Hail. This does a good amount of damage to in an area of effect. It also does damage every 0.5 seconds for 10 seconds. So it ticks twice per second. Then we have Relentless Focus. This is a very, very, very good, like, important ability to have. You want this up all the time. This is going to grant you Minor Berserk, which increases your damage done by 8%. For 20 seconds, and it's going to give you 10% extra Stam recovery. So you want this up all the time. On top of that, when you do 5 or lighter heavy attack, you gain Assassin's Scourge, which deals 14,000 damage, disease damage. Remember that set I told you about? We have disease abilities. This is a disease ability, and so is this. This is why you want to keep these up all the time with that monster set, or with that set, is because they get increased damage. So these two abilities get increased damage. This gets increased damage by by the 440. And then on top of that, this does, the last ability we're going to get to does too. So next up is Leeching Strikes. This does it gives you health and stamina back for every light or heavy attack you do for 20 seconds. And then when it runs out, it'll give you 4,270. But you can actually cancel it at 18 seconds and still get the 4,270 stamina back. Yes, tested. Tested and approved. Alright, moving on to the last and final ability, and this is the main one we're going to use on bosses, and that is Toxic Barrage. The reason why we're going to use Toxic Barrage is this one, you unleash a barrage of arrows at an enemy dealing 4,270 physical or poison damage over 4.1 seconds. After Barrage ends, poison the enemy, dealing an additional 31,910 poison damage over 8 seconds. You can do this at full speed while channeling the attack. Now I'm going to show you guys what the damage looks like when you're totally buffed up. There we go. That's what you look like totally buffed up. 37,885. And then you got to think, we don't even have Spell Power Cure on us. With Spell Power Cure, that poison damage from the 8 seconds is almost 40,000. This thing can crit damage at 10k per tick if your crit is high enough. Now, if you're playing a Khajiit, this is a great ability. Now, you're going to ask, when do you fire that off? Well, you'll have to wait until I show you guys on the rotation after I do the CP. But Toxic Barrage is definitely the one you want to use. So, let's take a look at the CP now. Very similar to the Magicka DPS between the red and green trees. Just a little few things are different. So, in here, we have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces damage. Direct damage taken by 20%. We have 3 in a medium armor focus. This just gives us a little bit more physical resistance. As you can see, our physical resistance is 12k and 12k, and that's how we get that is because of this extra 312. So, moving over here, we have 43 or 56 in the thick skin, giving us reduced damage taken from damage over time effects by 20%, and then 43 in the hardy and 43 in the elemental expert, both giving us 10% from pretty much all damage sources. And these do stack with these ones over here, by the way, so giving you 30% damage reduction. On top of that, most enemies in the game do direct damage, but that direct damage is mainly light and heavy attacks. So having this in here really helps. 16 points, giving you an extra 10%, which does stack with this over here and gives you a total of 40% damage mitigation. So, really good. Next, we have 23 into Quick Recovery, and the reason why I have 23 into Quick Recovery on all of my DPS builds is because 6% healing received. DPS don't have any healing received. They have the lowest health, but they also have no healing received. So increasing your healing received in any way, shape, or form is going to be beneficial to your healer, because they're not going to have to like cast heals on you as much, because the heals they cast are just going to heal you all the way to max anyways, because of that 6% healing received. Now this is an Argonian, so I get 11% healing received, and I get 5% outgoing healing. So my heals heal me for a lot. Moving on over here, we have 23 into Warlord. This reduces your block cost by 10%. We have 16 into... Gotta check something, guys, because I screwed up again. Oh my gosh. Okay, we have 20 into Sprinter. This gives us 12.6%, well, 12% sprint, reduced sprint cost. We have 75 into Mooncalf, which increases our stamina recovery by 14%. And then we have 43 into Tenacity, which increases our stamina return from fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. You get a base, by the way, of 30% return. 10% extra makes it 40%. So you actually get 40% of your stamina recovery back when you do a heavy attack. And when your stamina recovery is sitting at about 1800, yeah, it's pretty cool. Moving on down here, we have 56 into Tumbling, reducing our dodge roll cost by 20%. Remember, we are wearing 5 pieces of medium armor. We have a 40% reduced cost in dodge roll. So that's where we're going to get most of our damage mitigation from, is dodge rolling and healing done, like the Vigor. So Shadow Ward, we have 10% in here to reduce our block cost by 10%. When you block an attack, just so you guys know, you block an additional 10% damage. So with the way this build's set up, with your damage mitigation, all that kind of stuff, just baseline, you have over a 50% mitigation. So you mitigate 50% of the damage with this stamina DPS. Now you block, that's another 10% off there. That's 60% almost. Like it's 10%, and then the 60%, you know, like your armor resistance, then the mitigation. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But you just mitigated a lot more damage this way. So moving over here, we have 35 in the Physical Weapon Expert. This increases light and heavy attacks done by 20%. We have 51 in the Master at Arms, increasing our direct damage done by 19%. By having these two at this point, you also unlock Butcher, which increases light and heavy attacks by 5%. If you didn't know, Dual Wield gets Slaughtered. Increases the damage of dual wield abilities by 20% against enemies with under 20% health, or 25% health. On top of that, a lot of the abilities you use, like this, Poison Injection, below 50% health. This one increases the damage below 25% health by 300%. So this is actually gonna get increased by 300%, and then this is gonna get increased by 25% when they're below 20% health, or 20% when they're below 25% health. And then your light and heavy attacks are getting increased by 5%. But I want to show you how much damage your light and heavy attacks are going to do. So your light and heavy attacks are going to do 19% increase in damage. But they're also going to get this. So they're going to get a 50 or 49% increase in damage. Now, since there's no races in the game that get extra melee damage besides the orc, that's still a lot of damage you're going to be able to do with your light and heavy attacks. 49%. So we have 56 in the Precise Strikes. This increases the damage and critical damage and critical healing you do by 20%. Remember, we're a Argonian. Argonians get 5% healing done. So their heals are going to heal. That Vigor is going to heal for a lot more. That's going to crit heal for 70% because you have a base crit of 50%. This adds 20% to it, so it's a 70%. Now remember, DPS wise, I also have the Rearming Trap, which applies 10% more critical damage. So I'm going to get a 40% or a 30% increase on top of that 50, which is 80% critical damage. And then last but not least, 19 in the Thaumaturge. This increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 19%. Remember, the only damage over time effects we have is Poison Injection, the Toxic Barrage, and Rending Slashes. The other abilities we have none of them do damage over time. They're not affected by damage over time, except for Dawnbreaker and Toxic Barrage, and then Poison Injection and this. This is not affected by the damage over time, even though it does do damage over time. This isn't affected by damage over time, even though it does damage over time. And this does not is not increased by damage over time. So that these abilities are actually greater off of the damage you can do plain, like just right out the door, and are greater affected by weapon damage. So alright, so that was the CP. Now let's go ahead and see this thing on a Parse. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have my potions set up. I'm going to go ahead and buff up, and then we're going to start with the rotation. So you're going to start by doing the back bar. You're going to do a light attack rotation like this, and then you're going to swap, do the twin slash, so sorry, heavy attack, that heavy attack, pop blade cloak, heavy attack, and then do killer blade, and then you want a light attack after that, drop this, and then do your light attack rotation, and then by the time you get back to this, it should be ready to proc. And then just make sure you recast it, and then swap bars, twin slashes, heavy attack, heavy attack, heavy attack, and then heavy attack, or light attack, and then switch bars. So when you're on the back bar, you want that skirt, the bow, the assassin scourge to be ready to go. And then once everything's done, you want, like, when it comes around to the bow, the Toxic Barrage, the way you want to do it is you want to make sure your trap is applied, your poison injection, and your endless hail, and you fired off your scourge, then fire this, and then once it's done, reapply these again like that, and then swap bars and just do your normal rotation. As you can see, some of those damage ticks are hitting for up to 10k from that Toxic Barrage. So I'm just going to go ahead and kill the skeleton. Now, the maximum DPS I've pulled with this build, that I've pulled, was 20k. And that's with this setup. Now, if you move it up to where you want to get into trials, and you switch to the Maelstrom bow here, and you change this to a weapon damage, and then you switch to dual stat food, I can get it up to almost 30k DPS. Almost. And that's with me. Somebody else who understands, like, animation canceling, that kind of stuff better, can actually pull a lot more DPS with this build. And I would say probably closer to 32. And that's with this same setup, the way it is. So yeah, but that's pretty much it for this build, guys. This is the Assassin Nightblade Stamina DPS build. So if you guys like it, it'd be great if you guys could hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me or more builds by me, I do have 8 more builds coming out during this week, both Stamina and Magicka DPS for the rest of the classes. So keep an eye out for those, and you can hit the subscribe button to see those. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye!